US Happy Mentoring Month. We'll call it International Mentoring Month, says me today. And happy 2022. So excited to be kicking off this month with a discussion about how to find the right mentor for you. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Lisa Fain, CEO of Center for Mentoring Excellence. The Center for Mentoring Excellence has been around since 1992, founded by Dr. Lois Zachary, who also happens to be my mother, but also my co-author. And we work with organizations all around the world to help them create, sustain, grow mentoring initiatives, create a mentorship competency, really believe and operate from the philosophy that mentoring is a leadership competency. Mentoring is about learning first and foremost. It's about growth, that everybody can benefit from being a mentor and from having a mentor. And so we wanted to start our conversation here today about how to find the right mentor for you. Let me offer this. Certainly I have content to share with you. So if you have questions or comments, you can unmute yourself, you can share in the chat. I know that there is so much wisdom in this virtual room. So I look to you to share that as well with us today. So here's one thing that I know for certain, which is that we all benefit from mentoring. Mentors benefit, mentees benefit, organizations benefit. When you have a mentor, you are twice as likely to be engaged with your work and twice as likely to be thriving in your overall well-being. So what do we mean by mentoring? Well, mentoring is this learning and this reciprocal mentoring relationship. At Center for Mentoring Excellence, we help organizations typically with formal mentoring programs. But we know a lot about both formal and informal mentoring. What's a formal mentoring program? Usually it's a structured initiative where an organization will either match or provide a bench of mentors for mentees over a structured period of time. So certainly there's great benefit to that. And informal mentoring. This is something that happens often much more organically. And the question I get a lot is, well, what's more beneficial, formal or informal mentoring? And the answer is yes. Formal and informal mentoring are both really beneficial. The key is to keep the main thing the main thing. I often say that's the best advice I ever got. My sister-in-law, the night before our wedding, stood up and said, here's my marriage advice for you. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And it was great advice for marriage, but it's also great advice for mentoring, formal or informal. If you keep learning at the forefront of your mentoring, whether it's formal or it's informal, you'll be able to experience the growth that we talk about. So I like to say formal and informal, not formal or informal. There's great benefit to. So what's in it for you as a mentee? There's so much, and I mean, these are really just 4 quick bullets, but what I'd love to hear from you is, for those of you who have been mentees, what has been the benefit of being a mentee? You can share with us in the chat. We know, as those responses begin to come in, we know that mentees receive a safety net. They get encouragement and support. There is a palpable reduction in stress and anxiety when you are have a mentoring relationship that really helps the mentee, and certainly guidance in navigating the system. So share with us what the benefits for you have been if you've been in a mentoring relationship. I like to say mentoring is a safety net, a sounding board, and a laboratory. I'm wondering what your experience has been. Someone who can point out blind spots, says Sumit. Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know, and having that place, that sounding board, that mirror, can be incredibly, incredibly helpful. Someone who challenges me to get out of my comfort zone, says Tara. Absolutely. The beauty of the mentoring relationship is the ability to be getting out of your comfort zone. This boost in self-confidence, candid feedback, all of these things, procedural knowledge. It's someone who will tell me when I need to take a break. Oh, such a great point, Mandy, right? It's not always about nose to the grindstone. Really, when do you need to have some self-care? Can be really an important feedback that you get from your mentoring relationship. Okay, terrific. You can keep those coming. And I love this just as a frame to think about what we're talking about here today, which is it's impossible, said pride. It's risky, said experience. It's pointless, said reason. Give it a try, whispered the heart. You can do it, said the mentor. That kind of encouragement and confidence can make all of the difference in our mentoring relationships. One more piece before I dig into how do you find that mentor is what's in it for the mentor. And before I even run through what you see here, what I want to say to you is pay attention closely, because as mentees, we so often don't want to burden a potential mentor. We don't want to burden somebody with the request of mentorship. We don't want to take up their time. We feel like we might be imposing. And yet what we know, both from experience and from data and research, is that the mentor gains as much or more than the mentee in the mentoring relationship. They see satisfaction from seeing their mentee develop. They gain more knowledge about other parts of the organization or the field. They get an expanded perspective and new ideas. They have an opportunity to share their experience and wisdom. They enhance their interpersonal skills. And there's lots of data that shows that they build their own leadership skills and their own capacity as a leader as well, their own competency as a leader. So where do we start in finding a mentor? Well, the first place to start is not actually in looking for who yet, right? The first place we start is with reflecting on our own experience. So I want to just encourage you can take a screenshot or write down these questions. But taking the time to think through your answers to these questions will help you in finding the right mentor for you. Who were the people who have guided, supported, and strengthened you in your career? How do they contribute to your growth and development? And what lessons did you learn from them? If you can take the time and think through your own experience, what has worked for you? Who have you connected with, and what have been some of those lessons? You can start to translate those into this next mentorship experience and what it is you might be looking for. So there are two deeper questions to answer in a half-hour session, but I encourage you to reflect on these as you look to go about finding the right mentor for you. Next, again, before you even look at who might be the right mentor, is to think about what you want to learn. Remember that learning is the purpose, the process, and the product of mentorship. Learning is the purpose, the process, and the product of mentorship. And so before determining who might be the right person, after thinking about what your past experience is what is it that you want to learn? What are your learning outcomes? You don't necessarily have to have a SMART goal yet, right? Many of us have heard of this term of SMART goals: specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely. But need to have a general sense of what is the area in which you want to learn and to grow. I encourage you to really articulate that prior to determining who might be the right mentor for you. Okay, we've reflected on our past experience. We've thought through what it is we want to learn. The next question we need to ask ourselves is, what are the qualities that we're looking for in a mentor? Think about a time when you've recently learned something new and how you learn best. Do you need somebody who can help you process externally? Do you need somebody with a specific set of experience? I'll give you an example of how this played out for me in my own life. I have been incredibly fortunate to have a number of mentors, peer mentors, one-on-one mentors, and throughout my career. And I realized a few years ago that after my own career journey, which went from the law firm world to the corporate world to the entrepreneurial world to now as an author doing some thought leadership, that I had mentors in various areas of my life, but I didn't have somebody who was a mentor who could help me think through, what does it mean to be a thought leader? What does it mean to be an author? What does it mean to get my ideas out there? And so I specifically wanted to find somebody who had some experience in thought leadership in the leadership development world. I also knew I needed somebody who could externally process with me. I'm somebody who thinks outside my head very often. And so I knew I needed somebody who had that capacity and willingness to do that as well. So I really had to think through that in determining who might be a good mentor for me in that realm. The next thing is, what do you want this mentorship to look like? There are lots of formats for mentoring. There's one-on-one mentorship, which is what I'm guessing many of you, as you were coming to this webinar, were thinking. This is more of a traditional mentoring experience. Group or peer mentoring. Mentoring mosaic, which is often happens when there's people in different levels of an organization. And then, of course, the informal, less structured mentoring relationship that we talked about before, and also formal. So let me just put a little pin on the peer or group mentoring. Group mentoring and peer mentoring are a little bit different. Very often group mentoring, there's one mentor and many mentees. Peer mentoring, it's a much more of a flat structure where each person in a mentoring circle, if you will, is a mentor for one another. I recently had a colleague reach out and say, can we form a mastermind? So you may have heard this term as well, which is a form of peer mentorship, which can also be a really powerful way to create community and mentorship for one another. Very important in those formats to remember to keep the main thing the main thing. It's still about goal formation. It's still about learning and creating that structure, but can be very, very powerful as well. So think about the format that's best for you. All right. So now we've gotten to the reflection and we've gotten to thinking about what it is we want to learn and even how we might want to learn it. Now we need to think about who might we learn it from. It's a great article in Forbes a few years ago from a colleague of mine, Ruth Gautier, who's a great thinker in the mentoring space as well, who said, never use the M word, mentor, as in never say, will you be my mentor? And I thought that was so provocative and interesting. Now, here's what she meant, and here's why I think this is so powerful, is because particularly when we're looking at mentoring outside of the context of a formal mentoring program, where an organization provides either a couple mentors to choose, potential mentors to choose from, or provides an assignment, most of us are looking for mentors outside of that context, or many of us are. And it can be very intimidating to approach somebody and say, Michelle, will you be my mentor? Without having formed that relationship first. So Ruth's advice, which I think is very sage advice, is to form the relationship before you make the ask and talk about what it is you want to learn. You don't necessarily have to say, will you be my mentor? But you might say something like, Michelle, I really admire the way that you can communicate your ideas. Can you give me some, would you be open to having a conversation about that? Okay, so how do we start to find some of these people? Using your current network to reach out. So it might not be that you know the person who is going to be your potential mentor, but you can use your network to say what it is you're looking for. When I was looking for a mentor in thought leadership, I would talk to people a lot and they'd say, hey, what are you up to? How are you doing? I'm great. I'm actually in the middle of trying to find the right person who can help me think through what I want my thought leadership in the world to look like. You know anybody? And the number of names that I got where I could start to have conversations were really, really helpful. And I was quite surprised. Look for successful people to network with who have achieved what it is you hope to achieve. Notice I said, I didn't say look for successful people to ask right away to be your mentor, but you want to start to ask some of these questions to see if there might be that learning fit. Don't assume that because you know somebody in one context, that they'll be somebody who's good in a mentoring context. You really want to start to ask questions, and we'll talk in a minute about what some of those questions might be and what that might look like. And then, of course, you want to follow up with the people you meet. And even if they're not the right people to begin a relationship with, they may know people who know people. This is this last one, make it a point to talk to people you don't know everywhere you go. The power of talking to strangers is really, really wonderful. There's a great TED Talk by a woman named Teresa Savadago who talks about the power of talking to strangers. And that can be helpful in terms of networking to find a great mentor for you as well. So really commend that to you as well. Is your network working? Brainstorm a list of people whom you already know or know of that you think might at some point be a good mentor for you. And then use that network to expand your network. You're going to conduct those initial meetings, again, not using the M word yet, right? But beginning to ask people to have conversations where you can start to learn from one another. So through these meetings, you'll start to gather some names and some ideas of who might be a good fit as a potential mentor. And there's the questions that you want to start to ask yourself before you dive in deeper to start to formalize the relationship are these questions. Is there a good learning fit between what I need and what this person has to share? Will this person have sufficient time, I should say, and willingness to mentor me? Will they challenge and encourage me to consistently raise the bar for myself? Somebody mentioned early on this idea of the mentor having pushed them beyond their comfort zone. So this idea of challenge is important. Good mentors will help you be uncomfortable. Good mentors will help you be uncomfortable. So will this person have a willingness to do that? It's the kind of thing you want to start to assess. And do they have the ability to listen and a desire and a willingness to mentor, as well as the knowledge and expertise that I need? Just because somebody's got the title and somebody's got the experience does not mean that it will be a good and productive mentoring relationship. It requires preparation. It requires commitment. It requires intention. And it requires what some people call soft skills and what I call really hard skills. Because if they were so easy, everybody would have them, of being able to do the stuff that surrounds the meat of the knowledge, right? Understanding how to look at the whole picture. Do they have the willingness and the ability to do that? So that can be very, very helpful. A few words of caution. Don't pick somebody who will be too easy on you. Don't select someone just because they like you. The temptation, especially when we're looking at a mentoring relationship, which often by its very nature is something where there's a power distance or a power differential. When you create that rapport, the temptation is, wow, here's somebody I admire. We've really hit it off. I think they really like me. Let's go. So take a time and a pause to think through, will you be able to answer yes to the questions that we just posed? Go beyond just initial chemistry. I will tell you, we spend a lot of time at Center for Mentoring Excellence talking to and coaching mentoring pairs. And very often, when we have conversations with the mentor or the mentee in the first couple months, what we hear is there's not a lot of chemistry here. I don't think it's going to work. And I will tell you that there are very, very few cases where we haven't been able to coach the mentor and the mentee to invest in the relationship and make that relationship work and go past this initial hesitation on chemistry so that the chemistry ends up developing with a focus on intentional learning. So it's not just about chemistry. Don't choose someone just because they're the most convenient. We've also had clients where we've had mentors and mentees in different continents, certainly different time zones, absolutely different continents, different cultural milieux, different backgrounds. Really, really critical to remember that convenience is not the best and the only factor. You can have great mentoring relationships across distance. It really does take commitment to bridge those time zone differentials, but you can result in an incredibly productive, exciting, and rewarding mentoring experience. Don't opt for someone just because you already have a relationship. Really stretch your network, and don't choose someone you report to directly. I want to just say one piece before I move on about that, which is very often we look to our supervisors, our managers, our advisors, if we're in the academic context, to be our mentor. And it is very important as a manager, a supervisor, an advisor to have this capability to help the people that you work with grow. But when your mentor is, or I should say when your only mentor is your supervisor, somebody to whom you report to, there's a necessary conflict there where that person's obligation is your performance and not necessarily your development. And at times your development and your performance may be at odds with one another. So really encourage you to go beyond that supervisory or managerial relationship. Demonstrate the qualities that get a mentor to say yes, the commitment, the conscientiousness, the readiness to learn, the willingness to hold yourself and the relationship accountable. Remember that your potential mentor wants to know that you're genuinely enthusiastic about your work, that you take an interest in actively designing your future, that you're actively open to feedback both on the relationship and how you're doing on the goals, that you're committed to your own growth, and of course, that you're ready to learn. And then you've had these initial meetings. You started to explore whether this person might be a good fit. Now it's time to make a good ask. Make a good ask, right? How do you ask this person to engage in something that's a more structured mentoring relationship? Be specific about what it is you want to learn and why you want to learn it and why you think this person might be a good match for you. So in my example before, I might say, you know, Michelle, we've talked a couple of times. I've really enjoyed our conversations where you shared with me how you put together this excellent communication. I'm looking to really delve deeper here. Some of my goals are to have really clear communication to my community. And I have learned so much from you. I think it would be a really great match for something a little bit more structured, a mentoring relationship. Is that something that you might be open to? And what might that look like for you? So you see this idea of specificity, keeping learning at the forefront and starting to set forth the expectations of what mentorship might look like so you know what you're agreeing to. Really, really important. Your ultimate decision should be based on whether you feel there's a good learning fit, whether this person has the expertise and the experience and the time and the willingness to help you achieve your goals, and whether you'd feel comfortable being a little uncomfortable working with this individual. So before I take a pause and see what questions or comments there are in this group, I want you to remember that what you get out of mentoring is directly proportional to the effort that you put into it. And I've seen mentoring relationships succeed or fail based on the amount of engagement and investment and commitment and accountability that the mentee is willing to put into it. In a few weeks, we're going to talk more about making your relationship stronger, but a little preview for you is that the mentee drives the learning in a mentoring relationship. The mentee drives. So it's really incumbent upon you as the mentee to put the effort into it. So let me take a pause here and just stop sharing and see what comments, questions, or thoughts you might have as you look through this guidance on how to begin to find the right mentor for you. Formal mentoring, asked Trisha, I'm curious about the criteria for matching pairs. Yes, so that's a great question, Trisha. When you're matching pairs, it depends on what the objective of your mentoring program is. So if you, for example, you have a formal mentoring program that's looking to increase inclusion in the workplace, you want to be thinking usually about matching pairs across elements of diversity. If you certainly want to be thinking about different levels in the organization. What is the learning goal and what are the learning strengths? So typically we advise organizations to send out surveys, asking mentors what they bring to a mentoring relationship and mentees what it is they want to learn. There's a few other things there as well. Great question. Happy to dive in deeper with you on that as well. Other questions or takeaways from this conversation? My takeaway is your example of finding a mentor for a specific learning objective, like thought leadership. Yes, thank you, Melissa. Wonderful. Well, as we approach time here, you can keep those coming. I'm going to stick around for a few more minutes for those who might want to ask some questions. Next week, same time, same place, we're going to talk about how to be a better mentor. So we're going to approach this from the opposite side. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll talk about how to make the most of your mentoring relationship. And we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So as I said, thank you for joining. I'll stick around for a few more minutes as well. And Michelle, if you would throw my email in the chat for people in case they want to get in touch. Really enjoyed having this initial conversation here today. Thank you so much.